Let's start with a working definition of bisexuality. And I'm taking this from the San Francisco Human Rights Commission report from 2011. Here's the definition. An individual whose enduring physical, romantic, emotional, and/or spiritual attraction is to people of more than one gender or sex. Now let's talk a bit about bisexuality in historical context. The earliest concepts of homosexuality and bisexuality in psychology really focused on these as psychopathology, arrested psychosexual development, and deviant abnormal behavior. In 1973, homosexuality was removed from the DSM as a psychiatric disorder. Affirmative approaches to homosexuality emerged in theory, in research, and in clinical work. Also, there was a development of positive models of lesbian and gay identity development, and in particular, there's the work of Cass and of Troyden. Even though homosexuality was removed from the DSM, sexual orientation was still seen in dichotomous terms. Bisexuality was seen as a transitional stage in lesbian-gay identity development. Bisexuality was not yet seen as a valid, enduring sexual orientation or identity. A further development in this area was the KLEIN sexual orientation grid. KLEIN built on the Kinsey scale, and he included 7 dimensions. He also included sexual attractions, sexual behavior, and sexual fantasies, but in addition, he included emotional preference, social preference, lifestyle, and self-identification. In KLEIN's model, there were 7 components rather than the 3 that Kinsey had. In addition, KLEIN also considered the past, the present, and the ideal in terms of people's sexual attractions, behavior, fantasies, emotional preference, social preference, lifestyle, and self-identification. The KLEIN scales were a great improvement in terms of conceptualization of sexual orientation, with the addition of 4 more scales, and also with the addition of looking at an individual's past, present, and ideals. Let's talk a bit about bisexuality in social context. And in order to do that, we need to talk about attitudes toward bisexuality. We talked a bit ago about dichotomous models of sexual orientation, and now we're going to talk some about stereotypes about bisexuality. We're going to talk about that because these have an effect on bisexual people in terms of invisibility, prejudice, and also in terms of discrimination. So now let's talk about some stereotypes about bisexuality. First, let's note that there's a parallel between social attitudes toward bisexuality and the concepts historically in psychology as well about bisexuality. Let's look at them one by one. The first one is bisexuals don't exist. And then, bisexuals are pathological and immature. They're in transition. They're in denial. They're lying. They're untrustworthy, unfaithful, promiscuous, and they're carriers of STDs and STIs. Another way to talk about the attitudes towards bisexuality is to talk about biphobia. And biphobia is a parallel to what lesbians and gay men experience in homophobia. Biphobia, here's the definition. The fear or hatred of bisexuals, sometimes manifesting in discrimination, isolation, harassment, or violence. Often, biphobia is based on inaccurate stereotypes, like the ones that we just described, including associations with infidelity, promiscuity, and transmission of sexually transmitted diseases. And this, again, is coming from the San Francisco Human Rights Commission report from 2011. As with lesbians and gay men, bisexuals internalize the dominant cultural attitudes, stereotypes, and values about sexual orientation and gender identity. These are based on attitudes towards homosexuality and bisexuality and the stereotypes we just talked about, and on dichotomous models of sexual orientation and gender identity.